So one of the things we do at RealtyQuant actually, so we publish market valuations, and you can look it up, Charles, since I know you're interested in this topic. So we publish market valuations, and that's what market valuations means. It's really like a statistically derived measure of where the market should be at the current time, or like where it is relative to its fundamental level. Fundamental level is based on income, population, and housing supply. So those are kind of, in my mind, the fundamental drivers of for real estate price values. And so, so it's really based on income, population, housing supply, where price should be. And if they're above that level, okay, perhaps perhaps the market is a bit overvalued, or also if we're experiencing in that market valuation, once it's computed, if we're experiencing like a sharp change in it from historical levels, then that could indicate we are entering maybe kind of a bubble regime and this kind of thing. So it's just a fundamental analysis. And so how I got into this thing actually is at the beginning of COVID, I just wanted to understand, like, is the market overheated? The usual thing that everybody's worried. Okay, are we gonna hit the peak in the market? And I know you were around like the previous global financial crisis. Okay, so
thanks for noticing the gray hair, Stefan. Thank you.
You told me, Charles. That's why. So okay, so so actually, so what they did is actually a global financial crisis study, like kind of a back study, and I looked at. And just as a kind of financial engineer, right? So that's kind of like my expertise, you can call it, like specialty, right? So it's kind of like a statistical study. And so the study was, was okay, what were the predictors of the declines in different states, different counties, like in different markets. And the best statistical prediction, I looked at foreclosure rates, I looked at relative volatility, price volatility in those markets. I looked at like risk-adjusted returns, different factors. And they were all not predicting the declines too well. And what was predicting, and it's not a huge surprise, was actually like taking things like price income ratios and like affordability deviations. So, but not affordability itself, but sort of the deviation in affordability above a historical level was extremely predictive of the actual declines that happened. And so in that study, and I've published it. It's on my website, and also I've spoken about it on different events. I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but basically it is like the 4 states. If you remember, do you remember like which states were like the ones that experienced the biggest drops?
Yeah, Florida, Texas, Arizona, California. I mean, mostly
Texas. Not Texas. Texas.
Well, Texas was a little bit more stable. That is true. They did feel it. I mean, I had property that I lost in Texas.
You had a property. Okay, that's interesting. Right. Okay, that is interesting. But broadly, like just in the price, like at the state level, perhaps maybe your market, was affected or something like that.
Yeah. Where we were, Massachusetts, we did get spanked. It took me years for my house to come back in value.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the 4 big ones, like just in that, were like, okay, we're like California, Arizona, Nevada, and Florida. Those are like really.
Nevada, absolutely. Yep.
Those are like 40 to like 56%, or Nevada. And so they were in deviation from their fundamentals, call it. They were like 40 to 60% in market valuation as well. And then there were like all those other states that were actually, there were about 10 states at the time that were undervalued. Places like even North Dakota and like a few others.
And maybe like Iowa.
Iowa at the time, I don't have like the numbers in front of me. It was possibly. Yeah. So yes, and the undervalued one is very interesting. They only dropped 4%. It's very, very interesting.
Right. Yeah.